Hello YouTube, welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about a viewer-submitted book. Interesting, first time this has happened. Someone who watches my videos sent me a copy of a book that they have written and asked me to review it. And so I read it and I'm going to do so right now. The book is called Twisted Apples by Syl Graf. It is the author's only novel as far as I'm aware, according to Goodreads. I am the only person who has reviewed it on Goodreads or has rated it on Goodreads. I'm not writing an actual review because I'm talking about it here. It's published by Folly XO, which is a small independent publisher based in, I believe, Maryland or Delaware, somewhere nearby where I live in Washington, D.C. And I may have to check them out because I have a number of unpublished novels that I've been trying to sell. And so maybe Folly XO is the person for me. You never know. This is a very short book, about 150 pages long, about it's in the grand tradition of hard-boiled detective fiction, in the idea of like Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler, those types of authors who write about these hard-drinking, hard-smoking detectives who are tough and, you know, talk in very colorful language. And actually, there's an explicit nod to Raymond Chandler in this book. One of the things I love about Raymond Chandler is his wonderful similes, metaphors that he comes up with. And one of them that he's famous for is, "It stood out like a tarantula on a slice of angel food cake." And there's a quote of that line or something very similar to it in this book. So you know the author is explicitly acknowledging his influences in that. And actually, the novel is full of literary references. They're all over the place. It's a very literate and very intelligently written book. And I like that. Maybe it's a little bit self-centered on my part, but there's something I really enjoy when authors are putting in kind of obscure references that I'm picking up on, because it makes me feel like, you know, I'm in the know, I'm in the club. It's like a private joke shared between me and the author. And this book does that a lot, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But let's get on with the plot. First of all, the plot is basically a murder mystery revolving around this greengrocer who sells apples, who has been murdered, and the detective Muldoon, who is a detective in Portland, Oregon, who's trying to solve this crime, but is not actually that interested in solving the crime, because in the grand tradition of all these famous detectives, he's more interested in going and getting 86 from bars and smoking and drinking and all the stuff that these type of characters do. One of the interesting things about the book is that it incorporates chapters from the point of view of the killer. So it's not just from the detective's point of view. You get to see a little bit of insight of where the killer is coming from, which I really liked. That's only done a handful of times, but I thought it was nice to get different points of view in there. I think mixing it up is really fun, and killers are fascinating. So kind of getting inside their psychology is always a lot of fun too. Now, I know what you're thinking, like, okay, well, this is fairly well-trodden territory. These detective fiction's been done a lot by a lot of different people, and that's true. But I think the author here is doing a little bit of a deconstruction of the genre and a little bit of a meta commentary on the genre. For one thing, I mentioned all the literary allusions. There's sort of this duality between the detective's sort of hard-boiled, you know, streetwise, tough guy exterior, and the author's incorporation of lots of quotes from highly literate sources, lots of foreign phrases, lots of French, lots of Latin, poetry, all this very, you know, intellectual stuff. That's sort of the tension between those two things is really noticeable in the entire book. And I think that's done deliberately. I think it's done to kind of call attention to the highbrow, lowbrow nature here. The other thing is the theme of apples, which is throughout the book. It's not just the title. It's also, and it's not just the occupation of the victim. It's brought up on almost every page, something about apples, rotten apples, that one bad apple spoils the bunch. Apples are clearly a very common theme in mythology and folklore. You have the apple from the Garden of Eden. You have the golden apples of Greek mythology. All this stuff is sort of referenced, and apples kind of come back again and again as a major theme, to the point that it almost feels like this is sort of an experimental study on apples in fiction and how it's all brought together. And I really like that. It kind of unites the book. It's more than just a getting from point A to point B story. It's got this common theme of apples which runs throughout, and that's obviously where the title Twisted Apples comes from. So that's really cool. What else about it? Oh, the other thing that I thought was a little bit meta about this book is there's one scene in there where two women are having a conversation, and it's the only scene in the book where two women have a conversation, and the conversation is talking about the Bechdel test, the idea that if a book doesn't have two women having a conversation and it's not about men, then it's not a very woman-friendly book, and that's a bad thing in some way. So the only conversation between two women is two women discussing how two women never have a conversation in books like this. So this, very self-referential and very meta in that sense. And it's also a very humorous book. It's got a lot of like little funny gags and silliness to it. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's the author's clearly poking fun at the genre that he's working within and poking fun at authors of that genre and readers of that genre. And so there's a fair amount of amusement to be had reading this book as well. The other thing that I think tips me off that the author is not entirely, serious with this, and it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's a little bit of a deconstruction of the genre, is the way it ends. And I won't spoil the way it ends, but it ends fairly abruptly. And like I said, the detective is not super interested in solving the case. He kind of has to be badgered into doing it, and a lot of things happen without his direct involvement and intervention. And the novel just sort of ends pretty abruptly, and I think that's sort of a commentary too, that it's like the murder mystery is not the point of the book. It's not like one of these Agatha Christie things where you're given a bunch of clues along the way, and then the reader is trying to figure out who the killer is based on all of the clues set up. You can't really figure out who the killer is based on that, because it's not that kind of a book. The mystery itself is sort of beside the point to the characters and the world building and the commentary on genre that's going on here. I don't think that those, I don't think that the actual killing or the trying to solve this is what the author had in mind when he's writing the book. It's actually quite interesting because I myself wrote a book that's in many ways similar to this, which is yet to be published. I have not found a publisher for it, but it's about, it's the same tradition of this hard-boiled detective. And in mine, he is a detective who is a explicit alcoholic, and he doesn't ever really make any effort to solve the crimes, but clues just sort of fall in his lap while he's, satisfying his thirst at the local watering hole. And so I wrote that novel, haven't yet found a publisher for it. If you are a publisher and you're watching this and you think that sounds like an amusing book to publish, contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. But, I can tell that me and this author are kind of thinking along the same lines, because we both had this idea of like, let's go back to this genre from the 30s and 40s that was so popular, and let's make fun of it a little bit, and let's exaggerate it a little bit, and make the hero even more of a caricature, even more of even more of an exaggerated character, someone who's not a realistic person who would exist in the real world. And make fun of the boozing and the smoking and all the stuff that these characters get up to in those 30s and 40s novels. So we're thinking along the same lines there, and I enjoyed the book a lot. It's a quick read. I was in need of a quick read. I had been reading lots of really heavy stuff and long stuff lately, and I was like, I need something that I can get through quickly, and this was great. I mean, it is a little bit, it's not super, super fast, because it is written in a fairly intellectual language, and you have to slow down a little bit to catch all the foreign phrases and all the, big vocabulary words that are used. But I don't mind that, and it is short, so you can get through it pretty quickly. I think this is a delicate balancing act you have to walk as a writer, like using all these really big words and all these allusions and literary references. It can come across as pretentious and artificial, and it can, be kind of obnoxious to read. It can be trying too hard. I didn't feel that in this case. It felt organic to the style that the author was going for. And, it felt like a little bit self-referential and a little bit knowing, like he's winking at the audience and using this kind of language. And I like, like I said in my last review about Washington Irving, I like big words. I like fancy words. I like uncommon words. I like words you don't hear every day. And so reading something that incorporates a lot of that kind of language is always a lot of fun to me. I enjoy that sort of thing. So I am very appreciative of Mr. Syl Graf having sent me this book and getting a chance to read it and being one of the first people to review it as far as I know. And if you are interested in independent literature and you are interested in hard-boiled detective stories that are a little bit twisted, a little bit modern, a little bit different, you might want to check it out from Volley XO Books. It's certainly worth supporting independent authors who are out there trying to scrape together a living or trying to just get their work out in front of the public, who are not going through these big giant publishers and have their fancy literary agents and stuff, who are just doing it on their own. I am a supporter of those authors, and I like to read their stuff, so I'm very happy to give a recommendation to Twisted Apples by Syl Graf. That's all I have to say about it for now. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I have much more reading to get back to, though, so I'm going to go do that. If you are interested in this book, if you've read it, which I don't think you have, but if you do end up reading it and you want to talk about it, please comment down below. And if you enjoyed this review, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more, and click that bell for notifications, because there's more book reviews coming your way every single week. I got more of them coming. I have a big stack of books I have to go read, and you'll never guess what I'm going to read next, because my genres vary from week to week, depending on what I'm in the mood for. So do all those things that you're supposed to do as a loyal YouTube viewer. If you are a writer who has written a book and you want me to review it, feel free to contact me, and maybe we can arrange that, because I like to review stuff. And until next time, I have been your host, Logan Albright. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.